to it when you're ready. Cason, I'm the editor on this, so if there's anything you bring up that you're like, oh shit, I didn't want to say that, or I didn't want to mention that person, whatever, let me know. I'll cut it right out. That goes for anything, and even if there's something you forgot to talk about, and you're like, and we wrap up and we're done for 5 minutes, you're like, oh man, like how did I not talk about this? I got it. So, all right, guys, yeah, I'm gonna be like a fly on the wall for this. So just have fun, tear it up.
Great.
Cool. So, Cason, also, there'll be 2 questions that I ask you at the end. It's ones I ask all my guests. One is the quote that we say at Tough Mudder that was sort of passed down to me by a gentleman named Craig. When was the last time you did something for the first time? I feel like you could answer that so easy, but people feel pressure. They feel like they have to be so, I don't know, it's got to be this amazing answer. And I always tell them it could be as simple as you hugged a stranger, to those questions, And then the final one would be, what do you say to the world in this moment? Another one where people feel like they have to be so profound, but it's the secret to it or the rub to it is the moment. Because for me, moments are forever. And what you may say this moment in 5 seconds, you may say something else in that moment. Not necessarily contradicting what you said before, but I had somebody tell me.
In that moment.
In that moment, when I ask you that question, what's in your head? What do you want to say to the world? And I was about to say, I had somebody said eat ice cream. So, which is a great answer, in my opinion.
Wear sunscreen.
Exactly. See, all that stuff, just as important. And this again, hopefully, it's just a conversation for you. I always tell people I like this podcast to feel like I was like at a coffee shop, or someplace, some little shop, or outside at the restaurant or something, and I saw you, and I'm like, hey, there's Cason. Cason, what's up? Sean Corvell from Tough Mudder. Man, how are you? And we sit down and chat for a moment. I wanted to feel like
I would recognize you instantaneously. Please, you would not need to reintroduce yourself.
Okay, so here's the deal. When you were recommended to me, and I was looking at all your stuff, I was like, wow, this guy's amazing, man. Wow, he's done so much. Look at this kid. And then as a kid, he did all this. Here I am. Couldn't do anything when I was a kid. I certainly wasn't motivated like this. I didn't think I was anyway. Playing with Hot Wheels, that's what I was doing. And then, even though your name felt familiar to me in the back of my head, I wasn't putting it together. And as I kept, finding out more and more about you, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he did our Toughest Mudder East.
Yeah.
And then it started coming to me because I remember you asking about your sister towards the end of it, because she was in contention, man. She was kicking ass out there, Bella. And then it started coming back. That's who this is. Holy cow. I mean, you were awesome there at the event, but I had no idea you would have done all this in your life. So, and I'm rattling on here, but I'm kind of like, this is so cool. So when we first were deciding, let's have him on for our Earth Day theme. But your story is just so much more. Earth Day, great, awesome. What you're doing through your business, Explorer Cold Brew. I'm saying that correct, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then you guys are funding clean water for people. That's great. We're going to talk about that. But also, as a kid, you summiting these mountains and for charitable reasons. And your story to me is also giving back. It was a quote that you had in here about, I wrote it down. Let me say it.
You're going to make me blush.
No, it was great. It was great because it's like one of those I try to say at the events, probably in a different way, but it is that. It is. Oh, that's my quote. Success wasn't getting to. I know it was. When was the last time you just? Wait, that's not you. Success wasn't getting to the top of the mountain. It was giving it your all, which is like. that's what I kind of say in a different way to people. This guy's perfect. So with all that being said, Cason Crane, and I'm saying your name right?
Yes, yeah, Cason Crane. That's me.
Okay, because this is one of the other things I remember at the Toughest Mudder. When I first was announcing your name, my brain was just forcing an R in there, Carson Crane.
It happens all the time. I'm so used to it. But yes, it is Cason. You can blame my parents for that one.
No, that's great. That's an awesome name. I will give them props for that one. And your story, Cason, again, it's just amazing. You know, when I'm looking at you as a little kid, you're one of those kids I just want to hug.
Well, thank you.
You got that energy. Go ahead.
I was definitely a huggable kid. I mean, I look back at, I'm still a kid. I mean, in so many ways, I'm 29 years old, so I'm pretty young still. Some people tell me I look younger. Maybe I'm getting to the age though where that's just something people say. It like almost means the opposite. It means that you're like getting older. But no, I feel like a kid. Certainly a kid at heart still. And was so lucky. I mean, I've been so lucky in so many ways my whole life. I mean, you know, you mentioned being huggable. I was, you know, sort of a vibrant, smiley kid. I'm still a smiley person. But I was also, you know, an openly gay kid from a very young age. And, you know, now I think we've come a long way. But gosh, when I was a freshman in high school, 14 years old, had just come out, that was hard, but I was so lucky. I mean, I had a family that supported me unconditionally and friends that accepted me. I mean, there was obviously some bullying, but you know, there's sort of always bullying. It's not I'm not trying to justify it. Obviously, I wish it hadn't happened, but I was lucky in so many ways. And even, gosh, through my whole life, I mean, I feel so grateful, and I don't even know how. You know, I try and give back, as you mentioned, in some of the ways, but I feel like it's never enough. I always want to be doing more. So one of the great things, and this is completely changing the topic, but one of the things that I love about Tough Mudder and why I got so passionate about Tough Mudder is something you actually said. Is we interacted during this race. I was asking about Bella, my sister, who's way cooler than I am, and you said, "Oh, you have no idea that I've done all these other things." But that's what's sort of crazy is that that everyone has their own story, and that everyone has these things about them, and that we're coming together and taking on these challenges, pushing each other and ourselves, and you're getting a glimpse of someone, but there's so much more depth behind every single person out there on that field. And I just know that in the back of my mind. I know it, and I know it because when you're out there, you know, when you're competing in World's Toughest Mudder or any of the Tough Mudder races, and you look at somebody else out, you know, crawling in the mud under barbed wire or running up an obstacle or you know, swinging from obstacles, you think, why in the world would someone do that? And there's always a reason. Everyone's got their own reason. Everyone's got their own background. But I just love it. I love just the sort of that grit that it takes to go out and take on those challenges. So I'm lucky to be a member of the community.
Yeah, you could ask that about a lot of things you've done in your life, you know, including that Tough Mudder. Why in the world would you do that? You know, going back again, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in central New Jersey for the most part, and I'm the oldest of 5 kids. So it was always a very hectic household. My parents had their hands full. And being the oldest, I think I have to say, I can't really take credit for a lot of our craziness. My mother is to blame, actually. Both my parents, but really my mother. She was the original Crane family endurance athlete and has her own incredible story. I mean, she inspires me every day. She unfortunately was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer in her early 50s. About 4.5 years ago now. And she, you know, she'd always inspired me before, going out there, competing in Ironmans, competing in marathons, going out and doing ultra marathons around the world. Like, you know, she was part of the first American team to compete in an ultra marathon in Libya back before the Libyan civil war. I mean, crazy. It was still crazy then. You know, unfortunately crazier now. But she has been so inspiring, and only more so in the last few years. I mean, she's just last Saturday, she raced in Ironman, Texas. And this is
Holy
someone
cow.
who she's been on chemo for 4.5 years. And stage 4 lung cancer is a terminal diagnosis. That's not curable. It's not even going into remission. It's just, can you manage the tumors and keep yourself alive long enough in the hopes that there's sort of a miracle cure that comes at some point. And despite all that, despite the fact that I don't think there's any doctor out there who would recommend subjecting yourself to an Ironman in that sort of fragile health situation, she completed Ironman Texas in 16 hours and 17 minutes under that cutoff. And it's not the 11-hour Ironman she used to do when she was pre-diagnosis, but it's even more impressive now. So she inspires me every day.
Yeah, that's huge inspiration. And it seems like that you got your athleticism, your competitiveness, that zest for life from her. I don't know, is your father also? Is he out there doing all this stuff?
My father, yes, he is, just not to the same degree. He has FOMO. So, fear of missing out. He doesn't like to be left behind. So despite the fact that he had his own, he's had an amazing career in the energy industry. He's one of the leaders of the push for renewable energy. So obviously, we're talking about sustainability and the environment, and he has been a huge influence on me and my siblings in that respect. He was talking about clean energy before it was cool to talk about clean energy. He's had his own ups and downs. He was actually fired from, he was running at one of America's largest energy companies, and he was fired very publicly for pushing them too hard into clean energy too early. And what's amazing about that is he's obviously been vindicated, and obviously he was on the right side of history, but he's an incredible inspiration in other ways. He has been an Ironman as well. In fact, he and I were just texting this morning, because we are potentially, you heard it first, the Crane family, the 7 of us, and potentially some extended family members are going to try and break the Guinness World Record for most family members to compete in an Ironman together this November in Ironman Cozumel. So,
awesome.
Yeah. We do all sorts of crazy endurance stuff. Obviously, Ironman is one. We also, we all have a deep appreciation for the Tough Mudder space, and my father has actually been a huge supporter. So that's also been, that the pit crew is part of the team, and he's been, many a sleepless night out there, making sure we're drinking our fluids and getting some energy bars in our system, as in World's Toughest Mudder and in Toughest Mudder East. He's an amazing guy, and he's been very generous of his time and his love for me and my siblings, and supporting us in everything we do.
I can see why your parents, you being the oldest, said we got to have more of these. This is great. I don't know what people were talking about. This kid's awesome.
It was either that or the Catholic upbringing, one of the two.
And I feel like you guys are the real version of the Incredibles, the cartoon hero family. Yeah. You guys are actually superheroes. You're doing all this, but secretly you're out there doing some amazing things, saving people, saving this world. So going back again, you came out when you were 14. Yes. Life before 14, because usually it seems like that's a very hard thing for especially kids to do. I'm guessing you had a great support system with your family. What was life like before you came out for you?
So, what's funny is I never really felt like I was in the closet. Folks have asked me at times, like, what's your coming out story? And I always I sort of look back and I'm like, I never really felt like I wasn't out. It's just prior to that, I wasn't really thinking about it. I was a little bit of a late bloomer, I guess. And in middle school, there was a little bit of, everyone was just starting to get acquainted with like what it meant to have a crush. And I just didn't really get it at the time. And so really I came out, it really coincided as a freshman in high school with sort of discovering what it was like to like a boy for the first time. So it wasn't like I'd been forcing myself to like girls or had been conflicted or hiding something. It was just this very organic crush that developed. And it coincided with my first kiss as a freshman in high school. And then I encountered it turns out that I was much more comfortable with accepting that and embracing it than maybe he was. So that didn't necessarily go very well because, of course, my reaction, I mean, I have this beautiful, to me, like this incredible, beautiful moment of joy that was sort of like discovering this whole new part of my personality and my life. And so naturally I went and told all my friends because I was so excited. Turns out he wasn't on the same page in terms of having other people find out, which sort of it just sort of shows how naive I was about so quickly I was to accept myself and enthusiastic about sharing that joy with others.
Yeah. People act like sexuality is like, oh, kids are too young to be even thinking about sexuality at that age. I remember being in grade school. One, I had a crush on my teacher. Two, there was this girl, okay, and she was probably the first white girl that I really paid attention to. She had this was in like 5th grade, and she had blonde hair down to her
early bloomer shot. Oh my gosh.
She had hair down to her butt. She smoked. She would swear. She would talk back to the teachers. My God, she was amazing. I would rush to that class every day and try and figure out where she was going to sit so I could sit next to her. Now, granted, I didn't know any more than you just want to be next to that person, maybe hold your hand. I didn't know where to go after that. But this thing that people feel like, oh, kids, they're not feeling any kind of sexuality or anything, that kind of identification of themselves yet. And I don't think that's true. I think that's these adults just afraid to acknowledge that in their children,
Yeah, so I agree. And there's a lot of banter on both sides about what, I think you're right to just sort of bring it back to those early days, because I think people have in their heads a more adult view of what sexuality means, that's not what it's like when you're a kid. And if you actually, each person, I'm sure if they think back, they'll remember that first crush, and it's not graphic. It's not, it's innocent and sweet. And that is so wait, what happened with your crush? Did you end up ever?
She doesn't know who I am. She probably didn't know. That's why I won't even say her name. I don't want to embarrass her, because she may be in jail for all I know. She was bad, man. she was an awesome kid. She had rumors about her and everything, but I remember she was smart though also. So that was probably her problem. She was bored with school, kind of thing. So, but that being
Sean,
said,
where did you grow up?
I was born in Annapolis, Maryland, grew up partly in Baltimore. Okay. That was Baltimore where I had all that. And then about in 7th grade, we moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. So I grew up in the Bay Area pretty much too. That's where I developed, and which is a great place. I don't know if you're familiar with the Bay Area, but awesome place in our country to grow up. And that's where also I started doing stand-up comedy, which was perfect.
No way.
Oh, so way, man. Yeah, I was very fortunate to start there. There was a lot of great people that came through there, and
I imagine.
It was awesome. So, getting back to you though, sir. So then, something sparked you coming along that you decided you wanted to climb mountains. How did that come around?
Well, again, it comes back to my mother because so I was, again, very, very lucky. My parents. They had to travel a lot for work, and I was very lucky because they would often just take us along. So they would build in, to work trips, they would build in sort of, bringing the five, this group of 5 kids along somehow. I don't know how they made it work. Now that I'm a working professional, I truly have no idea how they managed jobs and work trips with 5 kids in tow, but they somehow made it work. And so we were traveling all around, and it was always, it was almost like each trip was its own challenge, because my mother in particular, it was like a race where you would wake up in the morning You would eat as much food as you could at breakfast, and then it would be like no lunch. My mother has not been and never liked eating that much, so there'd be no lunch. So you'd sort of take some food from the breakfast buffet and like put it in your pockets like a hard-boiled egg, save it for later, and then it would be museum to site to monument to park to museum all in one day. And it was like, how much can we squeeze in 12 hours? And I mean, I'm so grateful because, I ended up studying history in college because I was so immersed in, culture and history, and being able to travel at that early age just opened the world to me. But it always felt, there was always an element of outdoorsiness incorporated somehow, whether it was, making sure that it coincided with a marathon. We would do a trip. My mother would run a marathon. We would join. We would do a half marathon. We would participate in whatever way was appropriate for that age, or whether it was going on a hike as part of the trip, or going whitewater rafting. There was always this desire to incorporate outdoorsiness and a sort of passion for adventure. And so I distinctly remember my first mountain. I just turned 15, and I was on spring break, and my mother came to me and said, "Cason, how cool would it be if we climbed Mount Kilimanjaro?" And I was like, "Wow, that sounds very cool. I don't actually know where that is, but that sounds great." And then I Googled it and I researched, and I was like, "Wow, this sounds incredible." And she's like, "And get this, we can go on your spring break, and they're doing the Kilimanjaro marathon the day before. So let's go. We can run the marathon. You can run the half marathon, and then we'll climb Mount Kilimanjaro the next day. It takes a week, but we'll start the next day." And I was like, I couldn't imagine anything better, especially because I was always I am very close with my mother and my whole family. But the idea of getting so much one-on-one time with her was not something I could say no to. Especially, I mean, you talk about competition between kids. One of the biggest sources of competition is your parents' time and attention. So it was a no-brainer. And we went, and that feeling, I know I'm going on and on about this, but just the last thing,
No.
that feeling when we got to the summit, it was hard. I mean, the marathon, I did the half marathon, she did the marathon. It was beautiful. That part was not that challenging. It was hilly, but totally fine. And then you start, and you're on your 5th day, you're going up to that summit, and summit day on Kili is hard. It's harder than folks, I think, realize. And I remember cresting the ridge and seeing the summit. It's you get up the steep part, and then you go to the ridge, and you're looking at the summit. And I wasn't even there yet, but I just had this like wave of emotion wash over me, this sense of accomplishment and also appreciation. I mean, you're watching the sun rise, and you just the magic of nature was just overpowering. Seeing this majestic peak and being there as part of it, I just felt so small in the best possible sense. And then we got to the summit and came back down, and I was on a high for weeks, and I thought, oh my gosh, I need to do more of this.
Yeah, I have a very good friend, JP. He's also a Mutter in that Mutter family, and he just took his youngest up there, but he's done it a few times. Kilimanjaro. He's always asking me to come with him, and man, I can.
You
only
haven't done it yet?
Tomorrow,
yeah, do it.
I'll get right on it.
Okay.
No, I do. You're right. It's something that everyone that I know that talks about it, it's been kind of like how you expressed. And I'm thinking of your mom, though. What an amazing feeling for a parent to see this in their child, to see them experience this, especially the way you just explained it. Man, that had to have just filled her heart, filled her soul.
It clearly did, because she then went and did it with all 4 of my siblings after me. So she got hooked on the feeling. It's, obviously not everyone has the means to go and climb Kilimanjaro. But for anyone who does have the means, I could not recommend it more highly. It's just, you just do it once in your life if you can, if you have the opportunity, and you might. I can't even really describe it. I feel like I sound a little crazy. It's so worth it. Actually, no, I mean, recognize it's a very similar feeling though to when you're pushing yourself in a Tough Mudder. And again, we sort of, to circle back to that question, like, why would anyone do this? But there is a magic to it. There's that magic of, in a different sense, but that magic of accomplishment, but also gratitude that you were able to, there's so many mudders out there, folks who don't have, the same physical capabilities anymore that I do or you do right now, right? And to see them push through a course, like, there's this sense of gratitude that no matter who we are or what our health situation is, where our circumstances are, like, we had the opportunity to do that, and it's magic.
That's awesome. You are cutting in and out on me, and so I'm like getting some of your words, but I'm feeling it in your expressions. I'm like, yes. Hold on.
Cool. So yeah, should I just like rewind briefly? And I guess, where did it start cutting out?
I think it recorded him anyway, right, Blake?
Yeah, it recorded, Cason, but yeah, give us a little refresher, just a short little rundown, just so that Sean knows for everything that you're talking about in case he missed anything.
Do you guys hear
and it's no
buzz at all?
Just
I got
buzz.
Nothing.
Oh,
I do hear
I got
it.
nothing.
I hear it a little bit, yeah.
Do you think it's coming from him? It could be coming from me. I got life going on all around this house.
I think it's me.
You guys have great ears. I couldn't hear a buzz.
I think it might be because of the charger. As wild as that is to say, I think that's kind of creating a little bit of distortion. But if that's the case, don't worry about it, because I can easily get rid of that buzzing and editing. So that's
okay.
So yeah, so we'll
Sorry about that.
Let's give it a few seconds of silence, real quick. That's all I need right there. All I need. That buzz is gonna be gone.
Oh my gosh.
We're good. We're good.
And by the way, I was just checking my calendar. I actually do have a meeting at 1:00 with Delta Airlines. We're launching on Delta Airlines in June, which is really exciting. Don't put that into that's still confidential.
For sure. Sure. Got it.
Our
I missed
policy
it
is launching.
anyway.
But we got 20 minutes to wrap it up, is what you're saying.
Yeah, 20 minutes. Okay. Let's jump back in.
Okay, so just being
so
transparent, because everybody knows I don't know what I'm doing on this podcast. So we just went out for a little bit because I wasn't hearing you. You were breaking up and you were just what you were just saying. So repeat that for me, because in your eyes it looked amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yes, basically, I was just saying how even though it's different, that feeling of reaching the summit of a mountain, it could be Kilimanjaro, it could be a mountain out west, it could be any mountain. And doing a Tough Mudder and having that feeling, it's not just accomplishment, it's also gratitude. I think that's what makes it so special, is you're in that moment and you're appreciating, when you're finishing a Mudder, like, you had the health and capability, no matter your circumstances, because everyone has different, everyone's dealing with some people with more physical limitations than others, and still getting through that. It's both accomplishment but also that gratitude, and I try and channel that into every day, and take those lessons and incorporate them into my everyday life.
Yeah, and then I think you had said that this was what is it, an open gate? Was that the word that you used? A gateway mountain for
gateway.
you.
Yes, Kilimanjaro is a gateway mountain, in the sense of you might be hooked after that. Just like after my first Tough Mudder race, I remember it distinctly. I was in college, and it wasn't a race, actually. It was just the classic Tough Mudder, doing it with my friends. I loved it so much. I came back the next day and I did it again. I was hooked.
Well, with this one, you were really hooked, because then you went on to do what they call the 7 summits. I didn't know that was an actual thing. I've heard people say it to me, but that is a thing. Okay, so describe that and what motivated you to do this.
Yeah, it is a thing. It's sort of an odd thing. It's the highest mountain on each continent. So you've got Everest in Asia, you've got Denali in our great North American continent. What an incredible mountain Denali is. Definitely, I think it would have to be my favorite after Everest. Aconcagua in South America, Kilimanjaro in Africa, Elbrus in Russia, and then in the Australia Oceania continent. There's two competing ones. Some people do both. I did both. That's Karsten's Pyramid, which is a wild climb, and Kosciuszko in Australia. So it's this incredible, wide-ranging, sort of diverse set of peaks, and people take it on as one of the. It's not the greatest mountaineering challenge. There are others like climbing the 14 peaks that are over 8,000 meters. That's an insane challenge. But this is one of those challenges that folks take on, and I took them on quite young. I was 18. I was just turning 19 when I took on this challenge, and I was doing it. Well, obviously, I was passionate about climbing. I wanted to do more climbing, but I was doing it because I thought it'd be a really incredible way to raise awareness and support for suicide prevention in the LGBT community, especially amongst other LGBTQ youth who didn't have the same supportive family and supportive community that I did. Suicide is one of the, to me, one of the most tragic causes of death for any young person, for any person, but especially any young person. And unfortunately, the rates of suicide are shockingly high, or maybe not shockingly high, like tragically high in the LGBT community, especially amongst our trans kids. And I had lost a friend to suicide in high school. So there was a personal connection that I felt like I couldn't do. I didn't know what I could do. I didn't know how I could try and take this tragic wrong that should never have happened, this loss of a beautiful young soul. And I couldn't fix it. There was nothing, I didn't know what I could do. And so I thought, well, the best thing I can do is just try to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. And that's what spurred this thought of doing this, taking on this massive challenge as a sort of a rallying cry and a way to draw attention to what was happening amongst LGBT youth. And so I took it on and I successfully brought the pride flag to the summit of each of the 7 summits for the first time that it had ever, people hadn't done that before. Nobody had done that before. I think to my knowledge still, I was the first openly LGBT person to climb the 7 summits, even to climb Everest. And it's one of those things where if somebody were to say, actually, no, I did that before you, I would be thrilled. Because, a big part of this is awareness and visibility and representation. And, it's something that, there are a lot of other LGBT folks that love the outdoors, but there's still definitely there can be some tension out there, and people can feel nervous about taking on those sorts of challenges, whether whether you're hiking or mountaineering, or even, whether you're doing a Tough Mudder or a triathlon. It can be very intimidating. And I think a big part of helping address that is just more visibility and greater representation.
Yeah. And you said you had taken Tibetan prayer flags up there also. I had never heard of the Tibetan prayer flag. Tell me about that and why you took it.
So, I was trying to think of additional ways that I could carry the spirit of my friend, but also other young people or other folks we'd lost to suicide, how I could carry the spirit with me as I was climbing Everest. And I was inspired to, there's this culture of bringing, or there's in Tibet and in Nepal, the prayer flags are a piece of the culture that, they're brought up as a sign of respect and, for the mountain, which is, almost like it has a spiritual significance. The mountain itself does. And so I thought, and when flying in the wind, the prayer flags fly in the wind, and in a way it sort of spreads the prayers through, through the world, through the universe, through the cosmos. There's probably a better explanation of this that someone else could give you, but for me, it just inspired this thought of, that's maybe one way where I could bring the spirit of these beautiful souls with me. And so I wrote some, and I had anyone who wanted to write messages of love in dedication to people who we'd lost to suicide, actually really lost in any context, but with a particular focus on folks who we'd lost to suicide. And I brought those with me and had them planted them at the top of Mount Everest so they could fly in the wind there and have those prayers and those messages of love sort of enter the Earth's cosmos at the highest point.
Yeah, it's like you screaming from the highest mountain, as that expression goes. Are those flags, are they there forever? So like when you get up top there's lots of flags that are still there, or did the wind blow them away? They got a cleanup crew to come, let's get these things out of here.
No, so there are cleanup crew, we all, when you're climbing Everest, a lot of, there's a Everest, especially about 10 years ago, there's a lot of appropriate action taken to help try and clean up the mountain, because there was definitely typically when you leave something there, it stays there. Yes, there are wind, there's elements, but there are still dead bodies there that you see from many years ago. So
no way.
Yeah, stuff stays there. And so there's especially oxygen canisters were the big thing. So there's been a real effort to clean up the mountain, and it's in much better shape from what I understand now. And certainly it was in better shape 10 years ago, I guess, than it was 10 years prior to that. But up on the summit, that's actually a good question. There definitely were a whole pile of, a whole set of other prayer flags there when I arrived. I don't know whether those were all from the season in which I was climbing, from the preceding weeks, or whether they were also from prior years. I sort of like to believe that they sort of they sort of over time become part of the mountain, and you might not see them. This is just in my head. I don't actually know if this is true, but in my head, they just sort of magically sort of disintegrate and become almost like cremation, like become part of the mountain. But I'm not actually sure.
Like biodegradable. It would be cool to see the very first one that was planted up there, the beginning of that history.
It would be.
Hey, and in your TED Talk, I told you earlier, I had watched your TED Talk when you were a very young man that you did. It was so inspiring. And you had mentioned that you are afraid of heights.
I am. I'm working on it.
How do you do this and you're terrified of heights?
It's funny you asked that, because I am genuinely afraid of heights. I'm also very good at pushing myself outside my comfort zone. I'm sure I'm not alone of the folks listening to their podcast. That's probably a commonality that binds us together is a willingness and an excitement to actually push ourselves beyond what beyond what we're comfortable with. Something that I try and do every day. But the heights thing was tough, I have to say. Some mountains more scary than others. I will say going up, it's a lot easier than going down. Meaning when you're climbing up a mountain, you're not looking down. You're looking straight ahead of you or down at, to sort of mark your foot placement. So, there are times you look around. Obviously, you need to have spatial awareness, and make sure you're sort of managing your risk. There's always dangers that you need to be aware of, but you're not looking down. You're not looking down to sleep. So when you're going down, when you're descending, that's when it can get a little bit more dicey, typically for me. So I remember coming down the Lhotse face on Everest, and it's just a very steep face. And I was just thinking, okay, I was counting steps. I was like, okay, make it 10 steps and then 10 more. And just, thankfully when you're going down, you go much more quickly, but it was just distracting my brain so that I wouldn't think about like looking beyond those steps and seeing how steep it really was. The other crazy one is Karsten's Pyramid. I mean, Karsten's Pyramid, picture like an arrowhead jutting out of the jungle. So it's extremely technical, extremely steep. And then once you get up to the top of this rock face, you then have to traverse the summit ridge for quite a while, including at one point they've stretched a sort of a wire across two. There's basically a huge notch. So it's just there's the only way to get across is there's this wire. You clip in and you pull yourself across, and you're looking down on either side, and it's thousands of feet down. Anyway, so I think it's just distracting your mind. I've gotten quite good at that. But part of the appeal is the challenge. So if it were all easy, if I didn't have fears like that, I don't know if it would be as compelling.
Was there ever a time that you really felt like I'm not going to make this, or even worse, I'm not going to survive this?
Thankfully, I mean, being 19 years old, I think now I would be a little bit more anxious about certain aspects to it. I mean, looking back, I am sort of shocked at certain moments when I could have or should have been more careful. Thankfully, it worked out, but I'm like, oh my gosh, that was a little bit crazy. There was a moment, I'd say that the scariest moment for me was on Denali. Denali is a tough mountain. It's very physical. The actual distance, so it's the highest mountain, obviously, ever, quite a bit higher. But the distance that you have to climb from base camp to get up to that summit is very far compared to other mountains. That's very physical. You go on and you're on this glacier. You've got 60, 80 pounds on your pack, and then another 50 or 60 in a sled that you're dragging behind you, because it's all of your food, all of your fuel, all of your gear, for it could be over a month on that mountain. So anyway, that was it's a very physical climb, and then what happens is you get exhausted. I mean, everyone, you're at that altitude, your muscles don't recover as quickly. They start breaking down. You're typically not eating as much as you should or drinking as much as you should. And my team, I climbed Denali twice. The first time we didn't make it to the summit. We only got to high camp, and we got stuck in a blizzard there for a week. And gosh, I still have in my head, and I have this recorded somewhere too, but the sound of the wind and in this blizzard just whipping the tent. I mean, like, it was this aggressive storm, and it didn't let up for 6 days. And finally we got a weather window, not to go up to the summit, just to go back down. Because, in terms of like the definition of success, the most important thing is that you get off the mountain in one piece. The mountain will be there. And, part of the sport, part of mountaineering is leaving the option to go back and try again. If you, as my climbing coach said to me early on, she said, if you come off a mountain and you don't have all 10 fingers and toes, or you get frostbite and you say to me, I got frostbite. And, if you even remotely think that that's cool, it's not. That's failure. You have failed yourself. That's bad climbing. I mean, there are obviously extreme circumstances where unexpected things happen. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when people, if you choose to push through and get frostbite on your fingers in order to hit a summit, to tag a summit, instead of turning back like you should. It's painful, but there's only one right decision there. Anyway, that was scary. And then coming down, the team, you're roped up, because when you're on a glacier, you're roped up in case somebody falls into a crevasse or falls off an exposed ridge. In this case, we were on an exposed ridge, meaning steep on either side. And one of my teammates, our lead guy on the rope, so he was in front of me, slipped off the ridge and pulled us all down with him. And that was terrifying. That was a moment when I thought, oh shit, this might be really, really bad. Thankfully, we were able to self-arrest, meaning, take the ice axe and slam it into you're like slamming your whole body into the slope to stop the fall. And he climbed back up, and we actually went back up to high camp, because that's just not, we went back up, made some tea, sort of reset. But it was very scary. We ultimately then later that day got another weather window and made it back down. But I look back and I'm like, thank goodness. That was a close call.
Yeah. Did you document any of this? Is there someplace, am I missing out? Is there someplace I can go on the internet and there's like the documentary of your experience?
Oh gosh. I wish, I in retrospect, it's one of my biggest regrets. I try not to have any regrets, but I do regret not documenting things more. I mean, even now, so since then, like, I've started a business. I run this coffee company now, Explore Cold Brew. And I think back to the beginning days of starting Explore, and I'm like, why didn't I document this? Like, I should have captured all this. This would have been so interesting and useful.
Yeah, it was.
And But I'm too focused on living in the moment, and I'm not good at taking photos or taking video. I wish I were better at it, but for better or worse, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on, but man, I could talk to you about this forever. And to put you on the spot, will you come back and let's do a second half of this? I know you have to get out of here real soon. Okay, so we'll reschedule that, but let's move on right now because you had mentioned you had mentioned your business, so I want to talk about that real quick. How did you start your business? How did that happen?
Well, it was one of those early pandemic moments where, as I'm sure everyone else out there, like I was stuck in my apartment in Brooklyn, not a lot of space. At the time, I mean, it's crazy to think back, but like we were hearing so much information. Some of it ended up being wrong, some of it ended up being right, but people were afraid to go outside. And as someone who loves the outdoors and who loves, going out there and being fit, that was hard. It was really hard for me. And I had I'm also a social person. I'm pretty extroverted. I like seeing my friends. I know. You would never believe it. And so I was talking to my therapist. I have an amazing therapist, and they were like, Cason, you need a hobby. You need a new hobby. And I thought, okay, great. Naturally, of course, for me, I interpreted new hobby to mean start a business. And at the time, coffee was one of the only things really giving me joy every day. And so I thought, this is amazing. One of the biggest issues I was having was caffeine intake, because I love caffeine. I mean, and it's critical, especially out there, on a Tough Mudder course. Caffeine is like the miracle drug. But there is such thing as too much of a good thing. And I was frustrated because I couldn't choose. There was not a way really to sort of have a choice, a convenient choice of caffeine levels. So that was the original impetus. We developed a cold brew concentrate that comes in 4 caffeine levels, because sometimes you need that extra caff. Like that's the all-nighter, night shift, extra caff, 300 milligrams per serving, and you can make it even stronger than that. But then sometimes, we also made a decaf, because, there's pregnant moms out there who can't drink decaf. Sometimes I want a decaf at night because I don't want to be up all night. Then we have a low calf and a regular. So pick your poison, and you can adjust according to, how you're feeling, or, your body's appropriate caffeine intake is. That was the original. We've come a long way since then, but that was the original genesis for starting Explorer Cold Brew.
Yeah, you did a great job with it. Explorer Cold Brew. The packaging looks great, and it is. It's an awesome packaging. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I'm like, hey, I'll have this just to put it up on my shelf. It'll make my house look better. Are you cutting us off, Blake?
It's time to cut. He's got important shit, man. He's got a call with Delta. That's more important than us, man.
That is true. My wife works with the Delta, so it's important.
Oh, no way.